Welcome back, Focus Learners, to another explainer. Today, we're taking a look at something absolutely massive, the very architecture of human society. We are going to unpack exactly how societies organize themselves. We're talking about everything from simple, everyday rules all the way up to the incredibly complex global systems that govern entire nations. So let's build a framework to really understand the rulers, the ruled, and the systems that connect us all.
Now imagine stepping inside the Indian Parliament. The sheer scale of it, the hundreds of seats, that grand architecture, it perfectly captures just how massive national governance really is. But thinking about a room like that begs a pretty fundamental question, doesn't it? Who actually gets to decide that the people sitting in those seats are the government? How exactly do they get their authority?
Well, that is exactly what we're going to answer today. Here is our roadmap. Number 1, what is a government? 2, functions of the government. 3, the principles of democracy. 4, types of democratic governments. And 5, other forms of government.
All right, let's jump in. Section 1. What is a government?
Before we can even begin to understand complex global systems, we really need to nail down what a government actually does and why we as humans have consistently decided we need one. You see, government isn't just some abstract, high-level concept debated in grand buildings. It is literally everywhere in our daily lives. When you're driving on a newly paved road, when you feel secure because of national defense, when you visit a public healthcare clinic, or even just when you get your mail, you are witnessing the government at work. It's the engine that maintains law, builds infrastructure, and delivers essential services.
And here is the wild part. These core responsibilities are definitely not a modern invention. If we look back at the ancient Indian text, the Arthashastra, written by Kautilya thousands of years ago, he literally outlines that a ruler's duties are threefold. It's protection from external threats, maintaining internal law and order, and safeguarding the welfare of the people. So, no matter the era, protection, order, and welfare have absolutely always been the fundamental goals of governing.
To really wrap our heads around how societies choose a government to achieve these goals, let's shrink things down to a super relatable school example. Imagine your school needs a student committee to organize daily tasks like sports, lunches, and assemblies. You basically have 3 ways to do this. Option 1, everyone in the school decides on everything. Option 2, the head teacher just picks the committee. Or option 3, the students elect representatives from each grade.
Now, if you've ever tried to get a big group of friends just to agree on a single pizza topping, you know option 1 is sheer chaos. Option 2? Well, it's highly efficient for sure, but it completely leaves the students without a voice. And that is exactly why option 3, electing a representative, is usually the sweet spot. It totally prevents the chaos of everyone arguing over every tiny detail while still giving the student body a really powerful, organized voice to advocate for their needs.
Moving right along, Section 2, functions of the government.
So, how does this simple school committee analogy scale up to a massive, complex, real-world system like a whole country? Well, any government, no matter its size, basically has 3 main jobs. First up is the legislative function. This is the creation of rules. Going back to our analogy, this is like the student committee sitting down and writing the actual rulebook for how school assemblies will be run. On a national level, this provides the entire legal framework for running the country. Job number 2 is the executive function. Because, let's be honest, creating rules is totally useless if nobody actually acts on them. The executive branch is responsible for the implementation and administration of those rules. In our school, these are the students who take that rule book and actually do the heavy lifting of organizing the midday meals and setting up the sports equipment.
And finally, the judicial function. You've got to have a system to make sure the rules are actually being followed and that everyone is treated fairly. This function protects rights and resolves disputes. Without a judicial function, legislative rules are basically just suggestions, and executive actions could quickly become unfair. These 3 functions working together are what make the engine of government run.
Which brings us to Section 3, the principles of democracy. We are going to zero in entirely on democracy right now, since it's the most popular form of government in the modern world, to uncover what actually makes it tick on a foundational level. And the most crucial point is captured perfectly in this famous 19th century quote by U.S. President Abraham Lincoln. In a democracy, the true source of power and authority isn't a king, and it isn't a military general. It is always the citizens themselves. The government exists because the people allow it to, and it exists solely to serve them.
But here's the thing. Democracy is way more than just showing up to vote every few years. It relies on several core pillars. Yes, it involves representative participation and universal adult franchise, which just means every adult gets a vote. But it also strictly requires equality before the law, freedom to express opinions, the rock-solid protection of fundamental human rights, and an independent judiciary to make sure those rights aren't trampled on by the government itself.
Okay, Section 4, Types of Democratic Governments. Now, this might surprise you, but not all democracies look or function exactly the same way. Different countries apply these democratic principles using very different structures. First, we have the stark contrast between direct and representative democracy. Remember our school analogy? Direct democracy is when all citizens vote on the actual laws themselves, something Switzerland actually practices on certain issues. But, as you can probably guess, bringing 1.4 billion people together to vote on every single road repair in India is just logistically impossible. That's exactly why most large nations use representative democracy, electing officials to make those day-to-day decisions on their behalf.
And what's super fascinating is how these representative democracies actually divide up their power. You've got parliamentary systems, like in India and Australia, where the executive branch, led by a prime minister, is drawn directly out of the legislature. Then you have presidential systems, like the USA and South Korea, where the president is elected completely separately. This creates a really strict separation of powers between the executive and legislative branches. So, two entirely different architectures, but both built on those same democratic principles.
Finally, Section 5, Other Forms of Government.
So, while democracy is incredibly popular today, it is definitely not the only way countries govern themselves. There is a brilliant dividing line between these systems. On one side, democracy grants universal adult franchise, the right to vote. On the other side, we have dictatorships where one person holds absolute power, absolute monarchies where power is just inherited, and oligarchies where a tiny elite group rules. What do they all have in common? They all have a big no in the universal adult franchise column. They completely deny the general public a structural voice. And that right there brings us to the ultimate difference between these systems: accountability. In a democracy, the government is strictly answerable to the people. If the government fails to provide protection, order, and welfare, those ancient goals we talked about earlier, the people literally have the power to vote them out. A democratic government has to focus on the well-being of all its people, or it will inevitably face the consequences at the ballot box. So, as we wrap up our structural journey today, I want to leave you with a direct challenge. What do you think are the possible hurdles in a democracy in achieving its values and ideals, and how can they be overcome? Democracy is a powerful tool, but it's not perfect, and it constantly requires vigilant citizens. Think about your own role in that system. How do we keep the engine running smoothly? Ponder that, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.